In my many videos and talking about Capone Game Bege, I have discovered something quite interesting when it relates to him, Bonnie, and Monkey D. Luffy. Because the funny thing about Capone Game Bege and Bonnie is that they both represent two different aspects of Luffy more so than any other supernova that we have seen. Because what Bonnie represents when it comes to Luffy is the start of the journey. Because her journey starts in a very similar way to Luffy's. She used a rubbery punch to knock out a powerful foe in one shot. That's where the similarity kind of starts and ends, as then her journey takes a totally different path. But the funny thing about Bege is that Bege represents Luffy's romp through the East Blue, because Bege's own romp through the West Blue is very similar. As it is said by Jinbei in chapter 857, Capone Gang Bege was known for either crippling or outright destroying the 5 families of the West Blue. We've talked about that recently. But the funny part about this is that Luffy has done the same thing in the East Blue. It is said that Capone Game Bege's Devil Fruit, the Castle Fruit, gave him the advantage. Well, Luffy's Gum Gum Fruit, as it was called at the time, gave him the advantage, because throughout the East Blue saga, Luffy destroys the captains of 5 different crews: Alvida, Bege, Kuro, Creed, and Arlong. Through his journey, he takes out the leaders of these 5 crews, and in taking out these leaders, he is given a bounty of 30 million berries. The same could possibly be said for Capone Game Bege due to the nature of how he's being described by Jinbei, though we don't really know the full truth of the story. But if this comparison does hold true, it begs to reason that Capone most likely either killed or crippled the 5 families of the West Blue. So, with that being said, another funny parallel in this is that Luffy names all of his attacks after firearms, right? This is funny because it's kind of the same relationship I see between himself and Frankie. While he names his attacks after firearms, Frankie's body is actually full of firearms. And the same kind of comparison can apply to Capone Gang Bege, because he has a body full of firearms, both the firearms of his men and the firearms of his body in being a fortress. But what's also quite interesting about him too is that out of all the paramecias that we've seen throughout the series, he is the most Zoan-like, which is funny because he doesn't transform into a full castle man all the time. He often pulls out parts of himself or lets things out of himself as a weird castle human. He always has these weird partial transformations, like a Zoan, which is weird because usually paramecias don't function like that. So I find that very interesting that he functions like a Zoan despite being a paramecia, which is funny because we find out that while Luffy was thought to be a paramecia for the majority of the narrative, it turns out that he is just a mythical Zoan. So I think they parallel in that way. A Zoan whom thinks he is a paramecia, and then in Capone Bege, we have a paramecia who acts like a Zoan. And I just find that very interesting. So with that being said, it's quite odd that Bege and Bonnie represent those two halves of Luffy, and then they themselves are introduced together. And what's even further more interesting about these two is that they're paired up in movies a lot because they are paired up in Stampede. But also, Bonnie has an affinity for pizza. Pizza is an Italian food, and Bege is an Italian mobster. So I find that within itself very funny that they have that weird theming in common. And to finish us off, when concerning Bege and Bonnie, like I have said before, I do think Bonnie is going to join the main crew of the Straw Hats. But if any other supernova were to join Luffy, I would think Capone Gang Bege would join the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Because out of all these supernova crews, other than Luffy's crew, his crew has the most developed members on it who have all had actual intricate parts in the plot as we've seen them. So that's why I could see the Fire Tank Pirates being a member of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. So with that being said, if you're enjoying the video so far, click the like button. And if you want to see more from me, click the subscribe button, followed by that bell so you never miss a video. In addition to, please click the hype button because it really does help. And with that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede. What?